What if the very area of your life you have almost given up on is the exact place God has chosen to reveal His power next? And if you stop listening now, you may miss the moment prepared just for you. There are moments in life when nothing on the outside seems to change, yet something powerful is already moving in the unseen realm. Many people walk away at this stage because they judge God's work by what they can feel or see. But chosen ones understand a deeper truth. God always works invisibly before He works visibly. If you are listening to this message today, it is not by accident. God is drawing your attention because the area you have cried about, prayed over, and silently endured is standing at the edge of divine transformation. Some of you have asked, why has this one area remained untouched while others move forward? You have faith, you pray, you believe, yet something seems delayed. This is where most people stop listening, but this is exactly where chosen ones must lean in. The transformation God is about to release will not only change your situation, it will change how you see yourself, how you pray, and how you walk with confidence afterward. Stay with this message until the end, because what God is preparing is connected to your understanding, your obedience, and your expectation. And missing one of these will cause you to miss the fullness of what He is about to do. God never begins His greatest work in the areas where we feel strongest. He begins where our confidence has been exhausted, where our strength has been drained, where our answers have run out. This is because God is not interested in sharing His glory with human ability. When He chooses one area of your life to transform first, it is never random. It is deliberate, intentional, and deeply personal. That area you have questioned, that place you have revisited in prayer again and again, that silent burden you rarely speak about, it has been marked by God as a place where His power will be revealed in a way that cannot be explained by logic or effort. Many people misunderstand this process and assume that if God loved them more, everything would change at once. But chosen ones understand that God works in patterns of purpose. He begins with one area so that faith can be built, testimony can be formed, and spiritual authority can be established. When God transforms one area completely, it becomes a foundation upon which future breakthroughs stand. He knows that if everything changed at once, the heart would not be prepared to carry the weight of the blessing. So He starts where dependence on Him will be strongest. Think about how God works with seeds. A seed is placed into the ground alone, hidden, surrounded by pressure and darkness. It does not become a tree overnight. It first breaks in one place. That breaking looks like weakness, but it is actually the beginning of growth. In the same way, God allows one area of your life to experience pressure so that something new can emerge. The breaking you felt was not destruction, it was preparation. The silence you experienced was not absence, it was incubation. The area God chooses is often the one you tried hardest to fix on your own. You applied wisdom, effort, prayer, patience, and still nothing moved. This is where discouragement tries to settle in, whispering that nothing will ever change. But God allows this moment so that you reach the end of yourself. When human strength ends, divine strength begins. This is the point where God steps in, not gradually, not partially, but decisively. Chosen ones are often confused because they see progress in other areas, while one remains untouched. Relationships may improve, faith may grow, opportunities may appear, yet one specific area seems frozen in time. This is not neglect, this is focus. God isolates one area so that when He moves, your attention is undivided and your testimony is clear. You will know exactly where the hand of God has worked, and so will those watching your life. God also uses this chosen area to reshape identity. Many people define themselves by what is lacking. They say, I am the one who struggles here, or this is just how my life is. But God intends to rewrite that identity. The very area that once defined your weakness will soon define your authority. What once caused tears will produce confidence. What once caused shame will become evidence of grace. This is why the transformation must be thorough and undeniable. There is also a timing element that cannot be rushed. God waits until the lesson is complete, until the heart is aligned, until humility has replaced self-reliance. This waiting is not punishment, it is protection. If God transformed the area too early, pride might enter. If He moved too quickly, dependence might be lost. But when God moves at the appointed time, the change is lasting and the fruit remains. The chosen area is also where God teaches you how to trust Him deeply. Faith that has never been tested is fragile, but faith formed in waiting is unshakable. As you wait, your prayers change. They become less demanding and more surrendered. Your words shift from asking God to do things your way to trusting Him to do things His way. This inner change is part of the transformation, even though it is invisible to others. God also allows others to misunderstand this season. People may question why that area has not changed yet. Some may even judge your faith. But this isolation strengthens spiritual maturity. You learn to walk with God without applause, without affirmation, without visible results. And when the breakthrough comes, it will silence every doubt without you saying a word. When God finally releases transformation in the chosen area, it does not come as chaos. It comes as order. Confusion gives way to clarity, fear gives way to peace, struggle gives way to alignment, and most importantly, you recognize the voice of God more clearly because of the journey you walked with Him. You do not just receive a result, you receive a revelation. This is why the chosen area matters so much. It is not only about what God changes, but about who you become through the process. The transformation is not only external, it is internal. God builds endurance, wisdom, patience, and spiritual vision inside you so that you are prepared for what comes next. What you are experiencing now is not stagnation. It is positioning. God is positioning that area of your life to become a testimony that strengthens others and anchors your own faith. When it changes, you will not question whether it was coincidence or effort. You will know it was God. And once God moves in one area, faith rises to believe Him for more because you have seen His hand. You have felt His timing, you have understood His ways, and you have learned that when God chooses an area of your life to reveal His glory, He never leaves the work unfinished. He completes it in a way that carries weight, authority, and lasting impact, shaping your future steps, your prayers, your confidence, and your walk forward. As someone who has seen the faithfulness of God unfold exactly where hope once felt fragile and uncertain, and stretched thin under the weight of waiting. Before anything changes in your visible life, God begins His work in the unseen places of your spirit. This is a principle many overlook because human nature craves evidence first and faith later. But God reverses that order. He reshapes the inner world before He reshapes the outer world, because external change without internal transformation cannot last. Chosen ones are led through this process not to frustrate them, but to establish them on a foundation that cannot be shaken by circumstances. When God prepares to transform an area of your life, He often starts by adjusting how you see it. The situation may look exactly the same on the surface, yet something within you begins to shift. The fear that once dominated your thoughts starts losing its grip. The anxiety that kept you awake no longer has the same power. You may not have answers yet, but you gain peace. This peace is not denial, it is alignment. It is a sign that God has begun working in the Spirit before releasing change in the natural. Many people miss this moment because they dismiss inner change as insignificant. They say, nothing has happened yet, but spiritual movement always precedes physical manifestation. Just as a building must have a foundation before walls appear, God establishes stability inside you before altering what surrounds you. He knows that if circumstances change before your spirit is ready, fear will return, doubt will rise again, and the old patterns will reassert themselves. Chosen ones learn that faith is not built by seeing, but by trusting while unseen work is taking place. God trains your inner vision so that you stop reacting emotionally to what has not changed yet. Instead of panicking, you begin to pray with confidence. Instead of complaining, you begin to wait with expectation. This shift is not self-produced. It is evidence that God's Spirit is already active within you. God also works on your words during this stage. Before transformation, your language changes. You speak less out of frustration and more out of hope. You stop declaring defeat and start declaring trust, even when the situation looks unchanged. This is not pretending. It is spiritual alignment. Words carry authority, and God prepares your mouth before He moves His hand. When your words align with faith, they begin to cooperate with what God is doing behind the scenes. Another sign of inner transformation is clarity. God begins to show you what truly matters. Some desires fade, some attachments loosen, and some expectations realign. You begin to understand that what you once thought you needed may not be what God intends to give. This clarity protects you from disappointment and prepares you to receive what God has actually planned, not what you imagined in limited understanding. During this stage, God also strengthens your spiritual sensitivity. You begin to discern His voice more clearly. Small promptings become noticeable. Convictions become sharper. Peace and unease become clearer signals. This sensitivity is necessary because when the external transformation begins, obedience will be required. God prepares your ears before He asks your feet to move. Many become impatient here because nothing dramatic has happened yet. But impatience is evidence of an unfinished inner work. God is not slow, He is thorough. He is building resilience so that when opposition arises after the breakthrough, you will not collapse. He is anchoring your identity so that success will not distort your humility or purpose. This inner work also exposes hidden fears and beliefs. God brings them to the surface, not to shame you, but to heal you. You may realize you doubted yourself more than you admitted. You may see patterns of self-protection, control, or mistrust that limited your faith. God gently dismantles these barriers so that when the transformation comes, it flows freely without resistance from within. There is also a refining of motives. God examines why you want change. Is it to prove something, escape pain, or gain approval? Or is it to glorify Him and walk in obedience? This refinement ensures that the transformation does not become a stumbling block. God will not give blessings that destroy purpose. He prepares the heart so that the blessing becomes a tool, not a trap. Chosen ones often experience a season where they feel strangely detached from outcomes. They still care, but they are no longer desperate. This is spiritual maturity forming. Desperation pressures God. Trust rests in Him. When trust replaces desperation, alignment is complete. This is often the final stage before visible change begins. God also uses this inner transformation to correct expectations about timing. You stop demanding immediate results and start trusting divine timing. This does not weaken faith, it strengthens it. Faith that rests in God's timing is more powerful than faith that insists on urgency. It allows God to move without resistance. When the inner work is complete, the outer change does not struggle to arrive. It flows. What once required effort begins to shift naturally. Doors open without force. Solutions emerge without stress. Peace remains even as change unfolds. This is the evidence that the transformation began correctly, from the inside out. The greatest danger is abandoning this stage because it feels invisible. But chosen ones understand that the unseen work is the most important work. It is here that faith is purified, identity is strengthened, and spiritual authority is formed. When the visible transformation finally arrives, it does not shock you. It confirms what God already settled within you, and you recognize that the real miracle began long before circumstances changed, when God quietly reshaped your spirit, renewed your mind, realigned your heart, and prepared you to carry the change with stability, gratitude, and unwavering trust in His hand at work beyond what eyes could see. God's power is unlimited, but the way it flows into a person's life is often connected to obedience. Obedience is not about perfection, it is about alignment. When God prepares to transform an area of your life, He almost always releases a simple instruction, not to test your intelligence, but to test your trust. Chosen ones learn that obedience is the bridge between spiritual preparation and visible manifestation. Without it, transformation remains delayed, not because God is unwilling, but because alignment has not yet been completed. Many people want God to move first so they can obey later, but God's pattern is different. He asks for obedience before evidence. This is where faith becomes active rather than theoretical. Obedience proves that you trust God's wisdom more than your understanding. Sometimes the instruction makes sense, and sometimes it does not. Sometimes it feels small compared to the size of the problem. But God often hides great power in simple steps so that the glory remains His alone. When God speaks, He rarely gives full explanations. He gives direction. The explanation comes later, after obedience. This frustrates those who need control, but it frees those who trust. Obedience loosens the grip of fear because it shifts responsibility from human effort to divine guidance. Once you obey, the outcome no longer rests on your strength, but on God's faithfulness. There are seasons when obedience requires action, and seasons when it requires restraint. Sometimes God says, move forward. Sometimes He says, wait. Sometimes He says, let go. And sometimes He says, remain faithful where you are. Each instruction is specific to the transformation he is preparing. Disobedience is not always rebellion. Sometimes it is impatience, overthinking, or trying to improve on God's plan. Chosen ones learn to obey without editing God's instructions. Obedience also exposes what we truly value. When God asks you to release something familiar, forgive someone who hurt you, speak differently about your situation, or take a step that feels uncomfortable, it reveals whether faith is rooted in trust or convenience. God does not demand obedience to restrict you, but to free you from patterns that delay transformation. As obedience is practiced, momentum increases. What once felt difficult becomes easier. Resistance weakens. Fear loses its authority. Confidence grows, not in self, but in God's guidance. This is why obedience accelerates transformation. It clears spiritual pathways. It removes internal resistance. It signals readiness. God also uses obedience to protect you during transformation. Sudden change without obedience can lead to pride, confusion, or misdirection. But obedience keeps the heart humble and the spirit sensitive. It ensures that when God blesses you, the blessing does not replace Him. Obedience keeps God at the center of the transformation rather than the result. Chosen ones discover that obedience often precedes clarity. You may not fully understand why God is asking something now, but understanding follows obedience. Many testimonies begin with a step that made no sense at the time. Only later does the pattern become clear. God reveals the path one step at a time so that dependence on Him remains constant. Obedience also sharpens spiritual hearing. The more you obey, the more clearly you recognize God's voice. This creates a cycle of trust. Hearing leads to obedience. Obedience leads to clarity. Clarity leads to confidence. This is how transformation becomes sustained rather than temporary. Sometimes obedience involves silence. God may ask you not to explain yourself, not to defend your position, not to announce what He is doing. Silence can be obedience. Trusting God to speak through results rather than arguments is a powerful act of faith. In these moments, obedience protects your peace and allows God to work without interference. There are also moments when obedience requires courage. God may ask you to step into unfamiliar territory. Apply for something you feel unqualified for. Start something without guarantees, or walk away from what looks secure. These instructions stretch faith, but they also unlock new levels of trust. God never calls you to obedience without already preparing provision. Obedience aligns timing. Many delays are not about readiness, but about response. When obedience is delayed, transformation waits. When obedience is immediate, movement accelerates. This is not about earning God's favor. It is about positioning yourself to receive what He has already prepared. God honors obedience because it reflects surrender. Surrender invites divine involvement. When you obey, you give God permission to move fully. Partial obedience produces partial results. Complete obedience produces complete transformation. This is why God is patient but persistent. He will repeat the instruction until alignment is achieved. Chosen ones eventually realize that obedience is not a burden, but a privilege. It means God trusts you with direction. It means He is involving you in the process rather than acting without your participation. Obedience turns transformation into partnership. As obedience continues, change becomes visible. Not rushed, not forced, but unmistakable. The area that once resisted movement begins to open. The struggle eases, the weight lifts, what felt blocked begins to flow, and you recognize that it was not effort that unlocked the change, but alignment. God does not require extraordinary acts to release extraordinary transformation. He requires willingness. A willing heart responds quickly, trusts deeply, and follows faithfully. This is why obedience speeds up what waiting prepared. When preparation meets obedience, transformation moves from promise to reality, from the unseen to the visible, from faith to fulfillment, unfolding with precision, peace, and purpose, as God confirms through action what He already established through trust, alignment, and surrender in the heart of those who choose to follow His voice without hesitation.